It's still in the hallway.
Have I ever told you about the time I lost 5 gobstoppers in my pants?
I do that all the time though. Like especially if I'm wearing a flannel, I'll find like candy in my pocket like weeks later.
Everlasting gobstoppers are my favorite, right? They have not been making them for a couple of years now, which really upsets me. Yeah. Anyway, that aside, I set aside one of each color for the end to make sure that I've got like, you know, whatever. Usually I try to eat the ones that I've got the most of and then, when, you know, sort of evenly distributed along the way, because that's just the kind of...
I do that too.
Yeah.
Especially Skittles.
Yeah, totally. But I put the 5 not in my pocket because I was riding in the car and I couldn't really get at it, so I rolled up the cuff of my pants and I stuck 5 gobstoppers in my pants roll and totally forgot about it. And then like 2 hours into this car ride, I reached down and there they were, and I was like, "Oh, there's my gobstoppers!" And I pulled them out, and my sisters were like, "You're the weirdest human being we've ever met." And I'm like, "Yeah, what's your point?"
Like a little squirrel storing your nuts.
I know I got judged in high school so much, but I didn't care. I was like, I have free food on me all the time.
That's right. All right, mortises and tenons. Dun, dun, dun. The absolute essential joint for most furniture making. We've talked about them already to an extent, right? That they are what they are. There's a little part here, that's the tenon. There's a matching hole, that is the mortise, right? It's important to remember when you're doing your layout that, yes, sir?
I do have a couple more questions, but I don't want to, I can come back later.
It's probably best.
Okay, that's fine.
Unless, are they really stupid, simple questions?
No, just want to talk about layout. I want to make sure.
Okay,
So,
yeah. Okay. 12:15, friend.
Oh.
Anyway, it's important to remember when you are doing your layout for these things that you've got your tenon going horizontally and the mortise in the vertical member. This is very important.
That's in terms of like how it will end up.
How it will end up, yes. It's very rarely that you see this happening unless it's like something that's been mortised into the bottom of something. You have to think about weight distribution and structural stability. Like, again, I can shake this and this doesn't want to come apart. I can shake this and maybe eventually it can. See that? So if I had something that was going to be subject to gravity a lot, having it oriented like this doesn't make any sense. It's oriented like that. So if you're doing a table, the legs go all the way up. The apron spans between, that kind of a thing. Cabinet doors, for example, that are put together like this in what's called rail and style, S-T-I-L-E, the upright ones, rails go across, styles up and down. You'll notice that all cabinet doors that are rail and style are put together like this as well, for the very simple reason that if you're slamming doors closed all the time, this will eventually break and drop the panel or the glass or whatever onto the floor, and all will be sad. Oh, beautiful.
It probably doesn't quite fit like it used to. You can grab it in there, but when I made my rail.
This is also, if I'm not mistaken, called cope and stick. Well, regardless, the way that this is cut is to, like, it already has this contour cut into it. It's 2 matching router bits. And so you route the profile. 2 expensive ass router bits. What you need to do is you just need to bevel your ends here.
Yeah.
And then it will go in. Yeah.
That's COVID. Yeah. This one's very 2020.
But you can see, like, in this case, these tend to get pinned because it doesn't have a supporting member underneath. So, like, it gets tacked from the back and it's no big. But if it was mortise and tenon in, which can also happen, then it would have, you know, gravity on its side. For your samples, you are going to mortise and tenon 2 pieces together that are the same thickness. It makes the layout a lot easier. It makes any number of things much easier. To that end, also, you're going to want to prep material if you haven't already, like the stuff that you've got, if it's still millable in length, if it's not already a perfect thickness of some kind, like 7/8 or 3/4 or some other thing that's really, really easy to work with, I would suggest trying to make it such. And of course, the other really important thing is that your ends are square. Like, they have to be square. So use your Starrett combination square. Don't use any other. Check for square in every direction to make sure that you've got everything going the way it needs to. And then if it's not, trim it again. Make sure it's correct. Anyway. All right. Let's just follow along this beautiful handout here. Once you've cut your wood to dimension and made sure your ends are square, very important, you're ready to begin. Remember, mortise is first. Mortise is first. Mortise is first. Joinery first. Ladies first.
Like to me yesterday. Like, can't work with the standard deviation. Can't work with the standard deviation. Can't work with the standard deviation. I said, kids, repeat it back to me. What did I just say?
Can't work with standard
It's like the
deviation.
same thing. It's
Yeah.
like mortise is first. Like, no, for real, mortise is first.
For real, mortise is first. Mortise is first. Mortise is first. It is a million times easier to fit a tenon to a mortise than it is to fit a mortise to a tenon. Just, you know, you make the hole first. That's always going to be the case in all joinery in woodworking. You make the hole first. So it's especially true of this, but it's true for all joinery, right? So when I do this demo, I usually lay out 3 mortises because I show you 3 mortising methods. They are of varying complexity, depending, but the layout is the same regardless. I have my piece. Oh, yeah, that's why I wanted that to be exactly the same height. Oh, that's okay. If your pieces are the same as one another, which is a beautiful thing when they are, let's just take these 2 for example. I'm able to take my big old combination square and rest it on the other one, which really helps when I'm doing like knife work and other things. Just having this out here so I'm not constantly having to fight with my bigger combination square is really a thing. I really like doing this one with my 6-inch combo square because it's just less cumbersome. So for what it's worth. But anyway, I'm gonna move this back out over here. So lay your pieces against one another where the joint will fall, literally. So I'm gonna have, are these not the same? What in the actual fuck is going on here? Yes, I know.
This is a beautiful simulation of what we would probably do. I'm like, oh, they're the same. I read, I correct on that one. Just forgot.
Okay. Okay.
Got these 2 from when you first started doing it with me. They've got them on the bottom, but would you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. You're a champ. You're a total champ. All right, I'm moving this crap out of the way then. Karen, this is the greatest lesson ever, right? I'm going to use this one for my tenoning stock. It is a little awkward for that because it does have holes in it already, but that's all right. It still is going to be everything that I need in order to lay out what I've got going on here. So I'm going to lay out 3 different mortises. I'll usually do 2 on the ends, or 1 on each end and then 1 in the middle, just to, you know, randomly placed in the middle. But I will physically put this on top where it is, right? So lay out your pieces against one another where the joint will fall. Mark the intersection with a pencil and make full lines across with your combination square. So I'm going to mark my intersection with the pencil, which is just a tiny little dot. And then, as I said, I'm going to mark that with my pencil, straight across. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Continue the line down each adjacent side until 3 sides are clearly marked. I'll do that in a moment. But I make sure that the ends are lined up where they need to be. Make a nice fine little mark. And you can see why having that guy there is nice. It's just less work. My hands don't get as tired. So I'm just gonna kind of arbitrarily set one up right in the middle here. I like to mark on the face like this because if I were to just draw a line on the outside here, it actually would make the entire thing bigger by about 1/16 of an inch. So instead, I make my mark like that, where it lines up perfectly, and then I just carry it over to the front. This is one of those situations where it is really important that you have everything clearly marked in terms of what side is what. So you can see on here it says, continue the line down each adjacent side until 3 sides are clearly marked. These are not lines that wrap all the way around. It's really easy to turn your work around that way. So. Ooh, sorry. What a sound. Sarah Martin. Cheap pencils. You will notice though that I'm doing that method where I put my pencil on the mark and then pull down. Wow, what a sound. It makes for a lot of accuracy, okay? So I'm just gonna carry those tiny marks over onto this side to make my life a little easier. Cheap Target pencils. Come on, baby. That's a little bit better. Oh, I know what I need to do. Granny glasses time. Come here, you beautiful granny glasses case. Where are you? Why, hello. So classy, so granny. So much better to see close up. Because these bitches have built-in readers. Yay. All right. I'm like, why is it so difficult to see? Getting old, baby. That's why. All right. Very obvious now, right? Lines on 3 sides. No lines on the back. Lines on 3 sides. All right. Step 2. Establish the depth of your mortise. Mortises, as a rule, should not extend past the halfway point of your wood. Now remember, this is going to be contingent on how thick and how deep and like what size and all of that stuff. For something like this, it absolutely really shouldn't extend past the halfway point because you're going to start to compromise the integrity of the entire piece that way. Yep, so like all things in woodworking, it depends on the proportions present. Assuming your work is roughly 2.5 by 3/4 by 14, length irrelevant, the mortise should not extend past 1 1/4. A depth of 1/3 to 1/2 of the total width of the piece is ideal. Make that determination and mark it out with a combination square on the 2 faces and the end. If the mortise falls in the middle, then only mark the 2 faces. Quite obviously. So, this piece is 2 1/4, so it'll be 1 1/8. I'd like to set up my combo square to that depth. And and I just mark. Come on down. There we go. Doing a great job. What can I say? Such an expert. It'll be fine. Again, you can see why the little one would be really nice to have for this. It's just not nearly as awkward. Can anyone put your hand on that? Thank you. Look at you. So helpful. All right. Then mark the end. When you mark the end, make sure that you're not rocking back and forth like this. It's easy to do, but you know, do your best. All right, I'm just gonna lay that guy out a little bit better there. Now, when it comes to actually doing this in practice, you do not have to mark every single mortise and tenon. Very often, things are repeated. So like if you've got a table, for example, and you've got 4 legs and everything is symmetrical and whatever, it might be that it's longer than it is wide, but if your legs are square, then the left-hand joint on every one of those is going to be exactly the same. And the right-hand joint on every one of those is going to be exactly the same. And in fact, they're probably going to be the same width, thickness, and distance from the edge. They're just going to be different distances from the ends, depending on if it's like oriented this way or this way, right? All that to say, when it comes time to do this, you don't have to lay out everything. You have to indicate to yourself where those joints are going to be and which joint it is. But this process doesn't have to happen for like every single thing that you do. Like everything else, you're going to set it up. You're going to cut all of the pieces that have that joint. And then if it's a similar joint, but like just slightly different end, like location, do the same thing. Just change that, you know, end stop and then cut all those. It's not one of those things that you want to just like cut one and then change it and then cut one and then change it and then cut one. Oh God, why would we do that? Why would we ever do that to ourselves? Or to me, Sarah Martin. Okay, anyway. Establish your mortise length. If your mortise falls towards the end of the board, it's important not to cut too close to the end to avoid breaking out. I will leave 3/8 of an inch material on the end in order to help avoid this. I also like to keep my material symmetrical, so I continue that measurement on the other side. Mortises that fall towards the middle of a piece can have smaller allowances, anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4. Measure and mark these limits on the piece and continue them onto the faces, 3 sides total marked. The reason I've got that 3/8 is this right there. Do you see that crack in the end grain? If I am too close to the end and my tenon has swelled or my mortise is like whatever, if I'm having some difficulty with it for whatever reason, I can actually just pop the whole end of it open. It's not the end of the world because most of the time when you're doing your glue up, a lot of glue seeps into that and we can put an additional clamp on it to help bring it back together again. But if you only had like 1/4 of an inch and you crack that, it's really, really easy for that material to just fall out, like to crack and be gone. And then you're just kind of screwed. We are making symmetrical mortises and tenons, right? Because it's just easier to do. It's easier to draft and to set up and to cut. But if I'm at all concerned about this, I can just make my tenon a little shorter this way so that it's not quite so close to the end, right? So bear that in mind as well. All right, so 3/8 of an inch off of the ends. And you, like I said on there, I like to keep things symmetrical just because it makes everything easier. It's one less thing to remember. It's one of those always eliminate variables whenever possible kind of things. So having a different offset is a variable that I just don't need. All right. So again, I'm gonna go 3/8 and 3/8. Man, oh wow, girl. I set that up so nicely. I just set it in the middle, but it's an even increment in. Yeah. Sarah Martin. I love it when that happens. It makes me feel like such a badass. All right, and that's 3/8 right there. And then mark it across. So for this cross marking that I do, while I have it set up and I'm making my mark this way, I'm also gonna take my knife. So the tools you're gonna need for this, a combination square, a marking knife of some kind, and a marking gauge. Those are the simplest tools you're gonna have here. I just really like to give myself a little, well, you don't need to go all the way side to side here, but if you can get a good scribe line in, maybe just slightly in from either side, directly on this line, that's a really good thing, okay? Regardless, you need to be able to see it, so I'm still gonna mark it with pencil, even as I'm scribing it, because you really can't see that knife mark very well. Yeah, one more. If you don't scribe with the knife right away, that's okay. It's just like you're already there, you might as well. But you never know, something might change. So I'm hopeful that it won't. Now, I also want to point out that I've done this about 10 trillion times at this point, and this still takes me a while. So plan on this being a process, okay? It takes a hot minute. All right, I've got it marked on top. I'm going to continue those marks down the side, just with my pencil, not with the knife, because I'm trying to give myself loads of visual cues of where these mortises are going to fall. You know? Why make it harder than it needs to be? And assuming that my... Oh. Sorry, I'm talking and thinking at the same time. Always dangerous. But remember, pencil on the line, make the mark. Pencil on the line, sorry, move the combo square up to it, make your mark. Not the other way around. Hello. And do you see how I keep on alternating my orientation to make sure that I've got the most support for my combo square as possible here? It's just, you know, when it starts to be unsupported, it wants to fall off and it's not going to make a straight line, no matter what. All right. Ta-da! 3 sides. Establish your mortise width. Mortise width is again determined by the size of the stock. If your width is easily divided into 3, make the mortise that size. Otherwise, scale up or down to a standard size. Make sure to leave a minimum of 1/8 of an inch on either side to prevent the tenon from blowing out when put under strain. Mark these dimensions on the surface where the mortise will be cut and on the end. So I violate this rule all the time, and I'll tell you why. 1/4 inch of material is tiny. So if you look at this right here, that's 1/4 of an inch, that's 1/4 of an inch, this is 3/8. I love 3/8 for this. It's bulky enough that it really does the job. It's not so small that it's gonna wanna break. 1/4 of an inch thickness of poplar is just not a lot. It's the kind of thing that could break off really pretty easily. So I usually, regardless, just scale up to 3/8 and just am like, Okay, it's 3/8. Yay! You know? So that's, you know, a thing to remember. If your piece is 1 inch, 3/8 is still great, honestly, because it's like you have less than that on either side. It's, you know, if it is narrower than 3/4, then yeah, you need to scale down at that point. But I'm gonna do this kind of with the understanding that I'm doing 3/8 of an inch. The thing though is that this is much, much easier to do after I've established my center line, finding the center point here. So I actually should probably switch the order of these two ultimately. Find the center line and mark it. Using a marking gauge, find the center of the wood by making tentative marks near the center and adjusting as needed. Use scrap cutoffs to find this if you have saved them. The reason why is because it marks up your wood, obviously. And if this is something that you're doing on a finished project, then finding the center is, you know, not amazing. Anywho, where was I? Let's see.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, of course.
I'm in there.
Yeah.
I'm using that Craftsman, or the shop vac, the silver one.
Yeah.
Is it all right to take the filter off and run it, taking the stuff out from underneath the planer? Or the joiner,
Oh, yes. However,
Okay.
I was going to tell you guys this. Woody is collecting our shavings, not our sawdust, but like what we produce from milling specifically, to work on a wood kiln. He's using it as
So I just dumped a whole bunch in with some sawdust.
well, I mean,
But I mean, it's a lot on the top that can be scooped back out.
yeah. So if we can like dedicate a barrel to it or something, that would be great. But yes, of course you can take the filter out.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it clogs up so fast with that filter, and when you're getting those shavings
Yeah.
off.
No, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll make the job a lot faster. Thank you.
No worries. All right. So we got to find the center, and the marking gauge is the way to do that. So this one is mine. It's slightly fancier than the ones that you guys have access to, in that this one micro adjusts. So all I have to do is lock the back one and then turn this little barrel, and it goes back and forth in tiny amounts. Yeah, it's so beautiful. But anyway, enough about my gorgeous marking gauge. Gotta have it out a little bit here so that it actually works. It helps if you have something roughly near center marked out, so I have a place to begin at the very least. So this piece of wood is 3/4. Perfectly 3/4. Nice job, Cammie. And so I'm going to begin by extending out my marking gauge, right, until the top portion of it hits that mark that I've just made. And then I'm going to lock it up. The way to check for center is to mark it in both directions. So I can make a mark on this side. Oh, shit. I didn't lock the other one when I did that. Hang on. I gotta lock it. Gotta lock both of them. Keep forgetting that. Hang on. I made the mark right there. Right there. Okay. Two locked, Sarah. Okay, and when I make my mark here, I'm actually passing it, so I need to pull it back just a little bit. And again, I can do that. Am I? That's very strange. Let me see this again. I'm gonna do it a second time. Yeah, I am passing it just by like the tiniest amount. So that's good. I'm just gonna loosen up that top one there and pull it back ever so slightly. And try again. Remember, the big thing with this is to keep this really tight to the surface. If it tips at all, it's in the wrong place. So just gonna try my damnedest to do this correctly. There's one. There's two. Yeah, that looks really good. It may be off by a tiny bit, but the nature of the blade on here, and you can see it on the drawing there, is that it's flat and then angled, right? So when I mark from both sides like that, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a V-shaped mark. So even if they overlap slightly, that V is still there, okay? So that's kind of the important thing. The more accurate you can be with it, the better, certainly, but it's not necessary for it to be dead perfect. But it should be pretty damn close. All right, so marking the one, and I'm only marking the centers based on, like, between the ends of the mortises. And what I'm doing is every one of them from one side, and then every one of them from the other, just to make my life easier. So I'm not doing more work than I have to. It's enough work as it is. It's too much work as it is. All right, I'm gonna pass that around real quick so you guys can see what that ends up looking like, okay? Having that center line really helps with then setting your mortise, because what you're gonna do is you're gonna base that mortise symmetrically off the center line. If you've got something that's easily divisible, if it's 3/8 and you're like, great, or sorry, 3/4, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do 3/8 and then, 3/16 on either side, yeah, you can measure off of one side. But let's say that this is some really random ass measurement, right? Where it's, measured in the 64ths and you're like, what? Finding the center and spacing it off of that is the way to go, because then you can be like, okay, I'm gonna put a 3/8 inch mortise on here centered on that line.
Oh, no problem. If not, there's a line.
There's a line, though.
Just
Just trust us, there's a line.
line.
So it really helps. It really helps to have that. All right, so now I'm going to establish my mortise width, which in this case is 3/8, right? So I also like to do this from two sides. Like I'll mark it, I'll measure and mark it from one side, I'll flip it over, I'll measure and mark it from the other, just to see that I'm being, accurate here. And in fact, when I do this, I like to set my combo square up so that that center mark that I'm referencing is in line with this line. Because what I have on here may have a tiny little bit of variation. Me establishing this is imperfect. If I reference this, I know I'm doing okay. One thing I am going to do, though, is I'm going to turn my blade around so that I'm measuring it with 16ths over here. Much easier, because then I can set this up to do 3/8 very easily without having to think about it too hard, In fact, I'm going to do it just like that. But I got to make sure that's in the right spot right there. Let's try that. Yep, gorgeous. So, do that and that. Oh, and then turn it around, make sure it's correct. It appears to be off by the smallest amount, but that's a good thing to know. Because that way, when I go to set this up, I've kind of made my marks wider and I know that the center of them is what's accurate. It's a tiny thing, but it's a big thing. A tiny, gigantic thing. And I'm probably, I'm doing more work than I need to now. What I need to do is set up the end of my combination square so that I'm able to mark that distance in from the end. So in theory, it should be 3/16. I'm gonna, again, come back over to my sample piece here, or my, not sample exactly, but my test piece. Again, remember, it helps, right? And I'm gonna make a mark. And I'm gonna make a mark. I'm gonna measure the distance between them and make sure that it's correct. And it's a little narrow, so I need to back this out. There we go. It could also be just my pencil as well, you know. It's kind of a junky ass pencil. That is slightly better. I'm gonna do it just a little bit further though. The important part isn't the marking actually, it's when you mark it with the knife. So that's really where it starts to be critical. But you know, it helps that this is also the same, you know, because you're gonna see it and it's gonna be a thing. Yeah, there we go. I like that. Perfect? No. Good enough? Absolutely. Boom. It's like, no, I want to be a pain in the ass. I know you do. You prove it every day, Wood. Wood, why you gotta be such a pain in the ass? Because I was born that way. Mm-hmm. You sure were. So I only mark it on this face between the ends. I'm still gonna mark it on the ends, just to, partly because like if you just look at this right here, just this face, you don't know which side is getting the mortise. So just giving that yourself that little bit of extra really will help you. What hands? I don't have any hands, it's fine. Oh, and I marked it on the wrong side. Haha. And that is why we double check things. I know I'm below the table surface, but you really don't need to see me struggle. It's fine. Don't watch me struggle, please. I love to drive the struggle bus. I don't even ride. I'm like, all aboard. Ow, fuck. Oh, and that, my children, is why I'm not a television host, teaching people how to woodwork over, you know, the airwaves. Joe Bennett was like, you should have a show. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't. All right. It is all marked out. It is a thing of beauty. You got it? Cool.
We'll send the photos to me too.
I'm a visual learner.
That's great. That's, again, also why we have the handout. All right, so if your mortises are going to be hand cut, readjust your marking gauge to mark the far side of the mortise and repeat the above steps. Score the ends with a combination square and a knife as needed. So, what I'm trying to do is actually score out the outsides of my mortise now, to give me a place for my chisel to sit once I need to start like refining things by hand. So again, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna base it off of this. I believe well, one of these was the good one, but regardless, I'm going to loosen these up, move it over to the far side. And it's important that you actually have it set at the far side because you want the flat side of that reference to be the side of the mortise and have the little bit of like bevel that you've got to fall to the inside. If you do it the other way, then you're actually making your mortise wider by having that bevel like on the outside there. So you can see that little notation in the bottom right there. It's a thing. So I'm going to, again, check my measurement here. And of course I did it again. I keep forgetting to lock the other one up. So that's one of the drawbacks of the good ones here, is that I've just effed it up again and again. Let's see. Oops, come on. It likes to follow the grain of the wood. So that's why you have to be like as cautious with it as you do. So I'm just checking my 3/8 now. And it's a little big, so I gotta back it up just a skosh. You doing okay, Adian?
Yeah, my allergies is bothering me.
Oh, word.
Ugh, I've been sneezing all week. My eyes keep watering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Do you think it was farting?
I thought you were. And I was going to be like, hold on, this doesn't happen normally.
I would not do that.
I know,
Her
normally it's
allergies,
me.
man.
Oh, what am I doing? There we go.
It's a seed, I swear.
There we go. Beautiful. Perfection. Perfection. So I'm gonna mark out. I'm just gonna do all of them because it helps me get everything referenced. It's particularly important when I'm doing a hand cut mortise here, but you know, it's not a bad thing to have this reference as well for all the rest of them. All right, ka-chow is ready to go. So, that is the instructions for mortises, for laying them out. This is about layout. This is not about doing. So just be aware that doing the mortises is its own thing. We're gonna, that is what we were about to go do though. So let's see, what time? 10:30? Yeah, we're doing okay. Let us abscond to the other room.